What is even true in the internet anymore? Raw milk? How about the COVID vaccine? And then there's the Epstein video. And how about that kangaroo video that we all saw? And what happens when AI can consistently create content that fools everyone? A jar of milk? That's new.
Goal for Costa Rica! Caya number 14!
Wow, thank you.
We are so fucked. Only about 8% of Americans have a great deal of trust in the news. That's down from around 70% from back in the 70s. Meanwhile, about 1 in 5 Americans are getting their news from creators. It's 2 out of 5 people if you're under 30. But the critical, really worrying number is this. 65% of people of all ages say that news influencers help them better understand what's going on. This skewed balance combined with the ability to create any content that looks real, that fools millions of people, honestly scares the shit out of me.
Mathematically, the decision is irrational.
And I'm aware that I'm on this side of the scale, and the power that we creators accidentally have now has been creeping me out for the past few months. Because if we trust faces instead of brands, and those faces can be replicated with a prompt, then where are we headed? If opening this kind of worms wasn't enough, let me level up once again. Because I genuinely believe that AI can help solve this problem instead of making it worse. Hear me out. This time, we have to go far, far back, but you guys said it was fine. So this is 1890s New York City. It was black and white, it was full of horse shit, there's a cholera outbreak, but hey, there's a new statue on the bay. The typical New Yorker would get their news from one of these 2 papers. So the New York World had become the biggest paper in the city after Joseph Pulitzer acquired it. Yeah, that Joseph Pulitzer. The New York World was actually printed from here, from a building here, until it became a bridge. And part of the strategy that Pulitzer used to grow it was making those headlines really punchy, really clickbaity, or is it like penny baity? Call it what you will. Those sensationalized covers might have been the first link baiting in history. It was all about making a sale. Friends of Cuba plead in vain. Free book to weak men. An Oklahoma divorce has placed this woman in a queer position. 5 cholera prevention tactics. The third one will surprise you. These weren't necessarily fake stories. They were just exaggerated. People only clicked on one of the 2 newspapers in the morning, so you had to do what you could to get the click. You know what I mean? Now, the New York World's competitor was called the New York Journal, founded by this dude, came into the picture in the 1890s with a very similar strategy. The New York Times was around, by the way, but almost going out of business because of how dominant the other 2 were. And so began this era of one-upping the news, because who could come up with the strongest cover that would get the most sales? Kind of like making YouTube thumbnails, right? We're gonna get to that. At some point, Hearst stole one of Pulitzer's cartoonists, the guy behind a popular cartoon called The Yellow Kid. And this is what eventually gave this whole mess the name yellow journalism. But the yellow press arms race between Pulitzer's World and Hearst's Journal got so bad at some point that some credit it for stirring up public sentiment to eventually go to war with Spain. A story for another day, but what I really care about is the reaction that we had to that era. Yellow journalism expanded from New York City to London. They just call it tabloids there. And eventually made its way everywhere. Every city has its own yellow journalism newspaper, and we all know which one it is.
These are the hot sheets. Best investigative reporting on the planet.
But there was a silver lining to all of this, which is that a new and more serious journalistic and objective approach to the news started appearing in the early 20th century.
Go ahead, read the New York Times if you want to. They get lucky sometimes.
The New York Times was one of them, and for a while, it was the reference of journalistic objectivity. Could you say that about any news outlet today? Time came in 1923, the New Yorker in 25, all of them with these entire journalist teams devoted just to fact-checking. Your brand reputation as a publisher was everything. If you print it, it must be true. That's not to say yellow journalism disappeared entirely. It's just that during this time, the balanced media outlets and their reputation won. And this balance continued as we moved to the broadcast era. Just like people trusted papers, then they trusted the radio, people wholeheartedly trusted the news. Now, the 50s and 60s were a golden era of news trust, but that came with its own set of problems.
Walter Cronkite, CBS anchor from 1962 to 1981, was thought by some to be the most trusted man in America. After a scathing broadcast from Vietnam, President Lyndon Johnson is reported to have said, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America."
Let's go back to that chart here. According to this Gallup poll, around 1972, more than half of Americans trusted the news. But there was a big and dangerous storm brewing here. Speaking of loaded clouds, your cloud storage has probably already given you some warnings about how much stuff you have in there. Maybe they've even gotten you to upgrade and pay for more storage, but our sponsor today can help clean that up. CleanMyMac was selected as one of Apple's top 25 Mac Store apps this year, and their new feature, Cloud Cleanup, can safely connect to your iCloud, your Google Drive, and even your OneDrive, and just find those large space wasters. All the cleaning happens locally in your Mac, so your data stays safe. You can remove files from your disk or evict them solely from your cloud storage. Not everything deserves to be in the cloud, and not everything needs to be stored forever, but who has time to go back and clean it up? And of course, you can also use it to manage your local storage using Space Lens, which is this interactive map of your entire drive that sorts your folders by size and points out duplicate files. We've partnered with CleanMyMac to give you guys a 7-day completely free trial and a 20% off if you use the code Slidebean at checkout. You help your wallet, you help your sanity, and you help our channel in the process. So don't let your cloud weigh you down. Okay. So a storm was brewing, because TVs were in the hands of everyone, but the rights to broadcast on those TVs, those were in the hands of a few very powerful people, wealthy, powerful gatekeepers who decide in the end what we see and have the power to sway the public's opinion. And yet, surprisingly, for a while, news remained pretty balanced.
Mayor Lindsay of New York thinks that society in general is responsible for the plight of the poor. Governor Reagan suggests that the individual himself is more responsible. Poverty is the chief cause of crime and violence, according to the mayor. The governor very much doubts that. Mr. Lindsay emphasizes social justice. The governor emphasizes social order.
Ryan Chapman has a fantastic video on this whole era, but we need to fast track to get to our tech times. I'm going to link it at the end if you want to watch. Now, part of what kept the news objective through all this time was government policy, because in 1949, fairness doctrine required all broadcast stations to devote airtime to fair and balanced coverage of controversial issues that were of interest to their home communities. Reporting the news wasn't a business at all. It was a requirement. It often lost money to the TV stations, but it wouldn't take long for these guys to figure it out.
This is 60 Minutes. It's a kind of a magazine for television.
And if this broadcast does what we hope it will do, it will report reality.
It's really the first thing new that's happened in the news business in an awfully long time.
I think this is the most terrific day in the history of news.
By the time CNN launched in 1980, it was clear that there was money to be made from newscasts. Some of the most watched content on TV was the news. And when the news is a business and no longer a public service, you have to start dealing with ratings and with metrics. When news is a business, you don't want to run news that will upset your audience or send them to your competitor's network. While it isn't necessarily lying, you can still omit stuff. You can choose not to cover stuff or be more intentional about your phrasing.
The communists over in Korea have been yelling quite a bit lately, louder than usual too.
When news is a business, the fairness doctrine starts to become a bit of a nuisance. But remember, there was a requirement: fair and balanced coverage of controversial issues. But also, who decides if the coverage was balanced? Who polices the fairness doctrine? Isn't the government itself biased? Finally, in 1987, after decades of legal battles around free speech and government overreach on the doctrine, but especially because of the pressure from major networks, the fairness doctrine was revoked. That's kind of about here in this chart. And for our scale, it means this. And also, we enter a new era where objectivity is important, but revenue is the priority. And revenue means engagement, loyal followers.
Well, the liberals are back again trying to establish the so-called fairness doctrine. Well, I can assure you I'm not going to let that happen.
And you start to see something like this, a spectrum of truth. Not black or white, not right or wrong, not true or false. And depending on where you stand in this chart, depending on what you believe, everything else is skewed. It's either skewed to the left or skewed to the right. Abe Rosenthal, who was the executive director of the Times, was quoted saying, "I get the impression, reading the Times, that the image that we give of America is largely of demonstrations, discrimination, anti-war movements, rallies, protests, etc. And I think that because of our liberal interest and because of reporters' inclination, we overdo this." I think it's true. College graduates in the US have always leaned left, and most journalists or news anchors were college graduates. But this particular quote is a rare self-reflection of what the media was becoming, and that polarization came with a decline in trust. And you can see it again on this chart, where as news moves to the extremes, they become less reliable. Truth is so flexible now that even social media platforms had to give up on trying to police it. Combine that with the need to get more eyes, and then we're back where we started. But worse, with more money and power behind it. This idea that if it's on TV, it has to be true, started fading. TV is entertainment after all, and what should have been a very clear line between the entertainment part and the reporting part became a blurry mess.
So we're half human and half extraterrestrial. We're hybrids.
That's the History Channel, by the way. It's not the Conspiracy Theory Channel. Naturally, a response to this emerged. We need balance, right? So enter the internet. Only this time, it made things a lot worse. You had to be a real nerd, or hire one, I guess, to be able to code and put a website in the 90s. This is the Web 1 era. Our boomer parents probably still believe a lot of what they read online because it's online, right? So if someone has the skills to put it there, it must be true. But Web 2, that's social media, blogs, website builders, meant that anybody could create and publish content. And the same phone screen that's serving you media news is also serving you a blog that launched last week. And if that blog is playing their cards right, it can show up in Google search, right next to the big names. What if the page has a neat logo and a solid domain name? That makes it credible, right? What if the design is neat and looks even more serious and credible than the real news? What if that guy was right about his stock calls last week? What if 10,000 people shared this article? More so, we know that publication, that's coming from big media, and we know they have an agenda. They are in it for the money, they are biased, they are owned by billionaires, and they are serving their owners' interests, and they have political ties. Should we really trust these guys? And so we arrive at us, me and all the other creators who analyze or explain or debunk or fact check. These are human faces, not brands. For marketing, for example, and for most age groups, creators are more trusted than any other type of advertisement. It is a lot of power, maybe even too much power, because marketing is just marketing, right? It's sales. But how about the truth? How about whether raw milk can make you sicker or healthier? Or whether the COVID vaccine is a mind control scheme? Or the LA Music Festival? The truth that defines how we live. The truth that defines who we vote for or who we go to war with. The problem though is that we also compete for clicks. We also make money from our content. We also avoid videos that our audience doesn't like. We've reached a tipping point because who can we trust? Who is telling the truth? This is where we live now, at the very worst moment in this chart, where nothing is true, where people who don't think like us are idiots or fake news consumers or brainwashed by the media. And in that broken world, go ahead and add AI content to the mix. You can have AI build an entire website in seconds, write an article that sounds professional, and now create a human face that just tells a story or create a scene that never happened. So what do you do about this? You do your own research, right? Google's whole mission is to give people the information that they want. But sometimes the information that people think they want isn't actually the most useful, or the truth. Check out this search. If you search no link between coffee and hypertension, you'll get the answer you want. But if you search for link between coffee and hypertension, you'll also get the answer you want. That's just one innocent example. We all know about the conspiracy rabbit holes that Google can send people on. What comes first on Google is what matches your search better, or I guess whoever did their SEO homework better. It has nothing to do with objectivity. It has nothing to do with credibility. Multiple studies, some with over 10,000 participants, have confirmed that search engines limit updating your beliefs. The most important takeaway is that we all create our own mini echo chambers without even realizing it. Our existing beliefs unconsciously influence the words that we type into a search bar, and because search engines are designed for relevance, they show us the results that confirm our initial belief. But two things happened recently that I really believe could put us on a path to repairing our truth structure if we can use them wisely. First, the kangaroo video. For, I think, many of us, that was the first time that we were actually fooled by a fake video.
Me and my husband. You okay?
And we were gonna release this video last week, and then Sora came out.
Holy shit! Holy shit! Are you kidding me right?
Now, before Sora, AI tools were kind of hidden, right? Like you had to sign up for this obscure tool, or maybe it was behind a paywall. But now this stuff is really out in the open. AI from only months ago was just ridiculously easy to spot, but look where we've come in such a short amount of time. But that is what I think is the key. These tools being free and in the hands of everyone, that's what might actually help repair this broken truth. Us creators were screwed, and that's a video for another day. Casey did a good version of that. But the good outcome of Sora might be that we might just start not trusting anything that we see online unless it's verified. Like anything that we see online, we have to consider AI unless it's proven otherwise, unless it's certified by an entity that we trust. This has prompted companies to begin developing authenticity checks like C2PA.
Content credentials, a standard that promotes the health of the digital ecosystem. Presence of the content credentials pin can shine light on the authenticity of a piece of media.
Imagine an internet where you don't trust any image or any video unless it's verified and signed to confirm that the image is authentic, that it was captured by an actual phone and hasn't been altered by AI. The broken situation that we have now is that realistic images can be made by anyone, but verification is really quite an impossible task. And this is the technical, I think that's the easy part to reshaping truth. The technology is almost there. It's up to us to make it our standard, to force websites that are reporting the news to us to use a standard like this. Now, beyond kangaroos and Sora, there's another way that AI might help repair where we are now. This paper published by 3 researchers at MIT, Cornell, and the American University, they had this instance of ChatGPT debate with conspiracy theorists about their conspiracy theory. So they tested this with around 2,000 adults with a treatment group and a control group. So GPT-4 would generate a 1-sentence summary of each person's belief, and then participants would rate how they felt about this sentence from 0 to 100. So these were conspiracy theories from the JFK assassination to COVID-19 to aliens and the 2020 election. And after that, they went through this 3-round discussion directly arguing with the LLM engine while the bot was presenting evidence. And afterwards, they would re-rate their belief in that statement, and they would do that again after 10 days and then after 2 months. Now, 2 different studies saw people's beliefs in that conspiracy theory reduced by 19% and 21%. Not only that, there was a spillover to other conspiracy theories where the belief in these subjects was also reduced. It's incredible. It might be the first time that removing a human from the equation actually did some good. Researchers believe that the study was so effective thanks to a combination of alternative, non-conspirational explanations, solid reasoning strategies. In other words, people seem to trust the neutrality and the sourcing of the chatbot. After all, if a chatbot is trained with all the data, it should be able to give a relatively neutral answer, much more so than a media organization, much more so than a YouTuber that might have its own agenda. This is still a dangerous double-edged sword, by the way. We've already seen Elon try to set his own agenda through Grok, and there are reports that left-leaning biases exist in the current version of ChatGPT and Gemini. But we can train bots to be objective, kind of like that TV presenter we saw earlier. The fact that the media has lost so much objectivity and that we have to rely on a chatbot instead is really messed up for a bunch of different reasons. But if this begins to bridge the gaps on what people believe, then I am all for it. Now, if these tech companies manage to resist the urge to code in their own biases into their LLMs, chatbots might become this new source of balanced information that presents data to what's actually happening, to what's true or not. And if you combine that with everybody demanding a form of image verification, a form of certification that what we're seeing is real and not generated by AI, then that could really look like a light at the end of the tunnel. Texas is a crazy example of this because you have this state where tech pros, founders have created this little bubble of liberal thinking in cities like Austin that contrasts really heavily with what's happening outside with this conservative red state. I traveled to Texas to see what it was all about, and what I saw made me change my entire perspective about what the internet is telling me. I'll link that video below if you want to watch. Catch you in the next one.